Welcome to the Horizons Forum. My name is Francisco Bushtin, and I'm the Vice President of Programs, Grants, and Communications at Horizons Foundation. We are thrilled to have you join us today for this special San Francisco Town Hall event, which is part of the Horizons Forum series. Horizons Forum is a program designed to connect the public with experts for insightful discussions on the issues that matter most to the LGBTQ community. Today's town hall offers an invaluable opportunity to hear from local nonprofit leaders, learn about the services available in your area, and explore ways we can all contribute through volunteerism and donations to support our community. During these challenging times, we need to come together, strengthen our bonds, and discuss how we can continue to uplift and empower each other. We're excited to be joined today by Nicole Santamaria from Ella para Translatinas, Mimi Demisewa from Our Family Coalition, Rebecca Roll from the San Francisco LGBT Center, and Matt Foreman from AIDS Legal Referral Panel. Now, all of these organizations are based in San Francisco, but operate across multiple counties in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in many cases beyond. And in the interest of time, we'll skip formal introductions so we can just dive right into our discussion. I encourage you to learn more about each organization and our panelists by visiting the Horizons San Francisco Bay Area LGBTQ organization directory. So I've often said that LGBTQ centers are absolutely vital in fostering a sense of community and providing crucial resources. They are truly, they serve as a hub for our community and are often the first place an individual turns to when seeking services or connection. And our LGBTQ centers, as we all know, offer a variety of services, including programs for youth, elders, health and wellness, and opportunities for community building, just to name a few. So Rebecca, let's start with the San Francisco LGBT Center. What are some of the biggest challenges SF Center is facing right now, and how are you finding innovative ways to continue providing essential services to the LGBTQ community?
Great. Thank you so much, Francisco. And such an honor to be here with all of you tonight and to be on this incredible panel of fabulous folks. And happy to take that first question. I think right now there's, all the usual challenges, plus a couple of additional things. Obviously what is happening in this country is having an enormous impact on us here locally. And those are really challenges rooted in the ongoing campaign of hate directed at our community, but specifically at the most sort of vulnerable members of our community. So trans, non-binary folks, young people, binary folks, and BIPOC individuals. So we're really seeing that have an impact on individuals. I think a lot of people are feeling a lot of trauma, both around the ways that they themselves feel targeted, that their families feel targeted, people who have families who are, and themselves are dealing with immigration issues. And so it's all the things that are targeting the queer community, but also all the intersecting issues that we know also deeply impact our queer community. So that's a huge piece. And even people here in San Francisco, where we have some degree of still local protections, state and local protections, we're still seeing just a huge amount of people feeling very deeply impacted about that on a personal level. So a lot of folks in crisis and really struggling. We're starting to see a huge impact on our local service provision network. So many of our sister organizations are starting to see changes to the services that they're able to provide based on changes in federal priorities. And that is enormously challenging to see large gaps starting to open up in the service provision network. So we here at the center do a lot of services ourselves, but we also refer to a very broad network of organizations. And the fewer referrals we have, the more people are going to be in crisis and lack that support. We're also seeing a huge number of people continue to come to San Francisco seeking a place of safety and sanctuary and finding that this is a very difficult place to get established. And even people who are coming resourced are struggling, but people who are coming without resources or without family support or without employment or existing housing are finding that it's a very, very difficult place to really to be able to thrive. And so we are working with a lot of people who are coming and facing a lot of challenges in both resolving experiences that they had in other places, but also just finding employment and housing and access to medical care and all the other resources that are so important. And all of that is really compounded by the massive budget cuts that are in some cases here and in some cases on our horizon. So we're seeing, huge reductions in federal funds with the threat of more to come, as San Francisco is really seen as a target for, the federal government's efforts to harm our community. And we're also seeing a massive budget crisis in the city and county of San Francisco. And those two things are extraordinarily challenging. And I think most organizations are facing massive, the threat or reality of massive budget cuts now or in the next fiscal years as we move into July and beyond. So those are, sort of the challenges that we're facing on top of everything else. It's a moment in time. And I know we're going to talk later about solutions and how, how our community can come together and meet this moment. So I'll hold that for then. But those are some of the current challenges that we're facing.
Thank you for lifting that, right? Because I mean, I think, being in the San Francisco Bay Area, or yes, if we look at San Francisco County, the number of LGBTQ nonprofits and programs that exist, but yet it's an ecosystem that also has this fragility to it, and now more than ever, right? We know that that is being tested in ways that we never thought it would in a long time. So thank you for lifting that. Let me just switch to the topic that, around transgender issues. So we all know too well that transgender individuals and the trans community continue to face some of the harshest impacts in today's political climate, especially under this current administration. It's just exponential. The healthcare access and legal protections to personal safety challenges these challenges are urgent and compounded for trans people of color and undocumented trans folks. Yet, we also need to lift, assert, and learn from the resiliency and leadership within the trans community that remains a powerful force for change and justice from the beginning of our modern movement, liberation movement. So my question is for Ella para Trans Latinas and Nicole. How are transgender individuals and trans community continue to lean into the resiliency and organize for the rights, safety, equity, and dignity, especially in a time when, it's multiple layers of attacks that are coming from all directions, particularly impacting trans people of color and undocumented trans folks?
Well, thank you so much, Francisco, and for this opportunity and for this question. But for me, it is important to mention that the challenges and the barriers and the obstacles and the persecutions and the attacks that transgender, intersex, and gender diverse community, unfortunately, is nothing new, right? The pandemic of hatred has been existent for centuries now. But one of the things that I think that the community at Ela para Trans Latinas is using, it is the community wisdom, the ancestry, the wisdom that is within the community, because trans Latinas in particular, or trans Latinx individuals, have already fled their home countries to survive, to save their lives. So that's the reason that they are here in the United States in the first place. So the strength, the resiliency, the hope that the trans individuals can show at this moment in the history of this country is crucial. In particular, not only the trans per se, the trans identity per se, but also the immigrant identity. So trans Latinx community, it is in the epicenter of this attack. And what the community is doing, it is looking within the resources that exist within the community, right? So I think that it's important to mention that hatred is nothing new, but now it is the moment that we have seen and people are showing their true colors. So if you are here in the city and county of San Francisco, it is the time to show up your true colors. And if you are a real ally, show up for the siblings that don't have maybe the resources, maybe the privileges that you might have, and come together and bring these resources and this support in real allyship to the community. So one of the things that I must say, it is that these speeches of hate, it is are increasing the numbers and the levels of attacks and the violence against trans individuals. And we have seen not only here in the United States, also globally. On April 1st, a trans woman in Colombia was brutally murdered. And his attacker, the perpetrator, the murderer, had even the time to film her in her agony. So trans Latinx community right now are seeing the impact of the hatred that it is nesting here in the United States. So it is important for us that also show our lives, show our resiliency, but also is a call to action, because we can say like, oh, here, city and county of San Francisco, the paradise for the LGBTQI community, but that's not true, right? And because we have over our shoulders a huge responsibility to show up for human rights, for what is just, for what is humane, this world is watching us as well. So I think that trans individuals and also trans Latinx or trans immigrants community, because immigrants, we are coming from everywhere, right? But trans immigrants have a lot to show in to the community to build the city and county of San Francisco that we want to live, in the city and county of San Francisco that we know that we can build to make it just, equitable, and free, real free. So I'll leave it there.
No, thank you for that. And it reminds me, a long time ago, one of Horizon's board members, at a meeting said, that if we focus on lifting a part of our community, all of our communities lifted. And I think that's so vital today. Let me move over to our LGBTQ individuals and couples who are increasingly visibly as parents, forming diverse families across all regions and backgrounds. Yet under this current administration, every step of that journey to becoming a parent and then parenthood for LGBTQ people and families is literally being challenged, from healthcare settings to custody rights, adoptions, school policies, through political attacks and policies changes and rollbacks. So my questions for Mimi from our Family Coalition. Can you tell us how LGBTQ parents and families are organizing in response to this escalating political and policy attacks? And the second part is, what are some of the ways they are building community support networks and advocating collectively to really protect their rights, their children, and the broader LGBTQ family structure?
Sure, thanks for that. So, LGBTQ families are really a subpopulation within a subpopulation. So historically, it's always been through these informal community networks that they've been accessing information and accessing support. And even today, when LGBTQ folks are starting the parenting journey, the first thing that they're doing is going to those informal networks and informal groups, and those things are still in existence. I think right now what's happening with the barrage of anti-LGBTQ laws and the barrage of policy changes, defunding different aspects of government, it's incredibly frightening, right? And so one thing that we did at our Family Coalition is we held a policy town hall just to do more of a know your rights. And what the families are really scared of is that we're having to go back to a time where our parental rights were not recognized. So trans and non-binary parents are scared. Are they going to be criminalized for having children and being trans? Are they going to be criminalized for having children and being non-binary, or simply being queer? And these are the things that our parents are beginning to worry about. Also, what about our rights in schools, right? And so when our children go to schools, go to these school settings, will our parental rights be recognized? Will our children be taught things that reflect their families at home? Or will they be taught things that are telling them that our families at home is abnormal or abhorrent? And so there's this ideology warfare right now that parents are like both facing, and this fear of all these policy changes of that can really dismantle the protections that families have. So right now, our families are really thinking about, how do we protect our family unit? How do we protect our rights to with our children? How do we protect our children when they go to schools? And protect those identities at the same time. So these, at the same time, we're also worried about the same attacks on our trans and non-binary siblings, and our children in particular, our trans and non-binary children, and also immigration rights and everything else that is happening, like is a concern for parents. And on top of that, LGBTQ families in general are pretty much, their older parents are smaller children. So then we have to think about, how do you still show up for your child as an intentional parent when you yourself are being attacked, and when you yourself have this heavy toll on your mental health. So these are kinds of the challenges that we're seeing in our parent community. So one of the things that we're doing, of course, is just rallying around particular issues. So that's one thing that parents are doing. But another thing also is parents are also rallying around care and making sure that there are spaces where parents can take a break and be revived, so that we can be present for our kids and be within community. And so these are the things that we're doing. And I also just want to say one last thing, that while we see a barrage of these anti-LGBTQ laws coming out, we also need to remember that the overwhelming majority of these laws are defeated. LGBT Map just came out with a report showing that about 90% of these things are being defeated. And we're also seeing that happening here in California. And while this time right now is scary, I also want to say that for a lot of the people within our community, that it's always been a struggle, an attack on themselves to be living in America. And I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to really imagine, what kind of America do we want to have moving forward, right? Is it really just to go to a time of pre-Trump, or can we really dream of something better that's really about equality, that's really about giving everyone the same opportunity?
No, thank you for lifting that, right? And I think that goes to, and also something that Nicole said, right? That yeah, there may be policies, but the lived experience sometimes is very different than the policies and protections that are in place. And we know that all too well in our community. And what is it that we can do in this moment, not to just resist, but to leap forward whenever we can, in which ways we can. But Matt, I'm gonna bring you into this conversation. I just want to set this up, with the history of San Francisco, that once it was the epicenter of the HIV and AIDS crisis, and it became a model for grassroots organizing, for community care, and public innovation in our collective response at that time. And that legacy still shapes the city today. And of course, AIDS legal referral panel was at the forefront then, and you'll continue today to fight for legal protection and pushing back against discrimination. But we also know, with the current political climate, persistent disparities, and those looming budget cuts that Rebecca mentioned at the beginning, there's urgent need to reflect on what we've learned as a community then, and how those lessons can guide us through the challenges that we expect ahead of time. So Matt, what lessons from the San Francisco response to the HIV and AIDS crisis are on organizing, care networks, advocacy can help us meet today's challenge, especially when we're looking at federal, state, and local budget cuts threatening vital social and healthcare services, as well as HIV prevention?
Well, thanks, Francisco. And I wish that I had something like, oh, I know what we're going to do. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't have any good answers. The one thing, not the one thing, but one of the things that's really stood out to me since I took this job last year is that San Francisco truly does have a wraparound model of care for HIV positive people that is unparalleled in the country. You know, we have the highest proportion of people at risk for HIV of any major city in the country. And yet we have almost the lowest rate of HIV transmission of anywhere in the country. We have 72% of newly diagnosed HIV positive people are connected to care within a month. We have an incredibly low rate, an incredibly high rate of our people having their viral load suppressed so they are not infectious. And all of that is because we have this network of mutually supportive organizations that have been nurtured over many years. We all work together to provide unique, different services to meet the needs of HIV positive people. However, as you said, Francisco said, and as Rebecca said, I would say this is a crown jewel in San Francisco's delivery of social services, but there's not a lot of gold in it. It is a very fragile system. So when we're looking down the neck or the nose of these budget cuts, both organizationally and for our clients, it's terrifying. Because they'll say, oh, well, even the city of San Francisco has a terrible budget crisis. We know that. It is going to be compounded threefold by the Trump administration's punitive actions. And guess what? San Francisco's got the biggest target on its back of any city in the country. So the city is going to lose federal dollars. The city has a $1 billion budget deficit over the next 2 years. And unless something miraculous happens, we are going to see devastating cuts to things that our clients really rely on, like Medicaid. Like the reason we have a low viral suppression rate is because anyone, almost anyone, can access PrEP for free. And 80% of our clients live on $30,000 a year or less. If Medicaid goes away or drops that coverage, they're not going to be able to afford PrEP. Young gay bisexual men are not going to be able to, that don't have money, are not going to be able to have PrEP. Therefore, HIV infection rates are going to inevitably increase. And guess what? We all know that what's going to happen. So the lesson I do take away from the early 80s and early 90s here is that people came together and screamed and yelled and held our local government accountable to respond to the crisis, and then to get our friends in DC to respond to the crisis. I will say the only positive thing I see in all of this on the horizon is that federal HIV funding through Ryan White, through HOPWA, it is the only federal funding going to combat HIV in the Confederacy. And if they drop those programs, there will be no HIV funding in the former Confederate states. And I think that's the only real positive thing we've got going for us, is for people in Congress with some shred of decency will want to protect their own constituents. So I say, come together, fight, scream, and yell, and hope that there's a shred of decency among the people who represent in Congress the former Confederate states.
I hope so too, and I think it's important, that does start locally, right? Our movement has always been grassroots, and I think it's going back to those, unfortunately, to some of those grassroots days where, it started locally. I want to pose this last question to all of you because, with the return of this administration, we've talked about the wave of federal policies are threatening our rights. Everything from healthcare protection, anti-discrimination enforcement. And a couple of you have said, that the state of California, and more specifically the city of San Francisco, the budget deficits are huge. And this is going to put a strain on this ecosystem of nonprofits as well as services from the city. And with a city that's known for its progressive leadership and historic role in LGBTQ liberation, I think we've been hearing across all the other three town halls that we've done is, has been about what does resistance, resiliency, resourcefulness for the LGBT community look like in this new era. So let me put the second question. What positive action can the LGBT community individuals take to foster this, while we're looking for a collective sense of hope and a collective sense of empowerment in the face of these challenges? Additionally, how is it that we can begin to come together, break some of our siloing to continue to build what we view as a strong, more resilient movement in the future? So this question goes to all of you, but let me start with Mimi and we'll go around.
Thank you. I think for us, we need to start thinking about our issues as being more than just LGBTQ, right? Because I mean, like Nicole was saying, like if we want people to treat us as human beings, like an example of a woman being burned alive isn't a trans issue. This is an issue about humanity. It's an issue about a crime. If I'm talking about children getting a new or learning something different in school now that's not actually history, the actual history that's taken place, it's not an issue of like an LGBTQ child or a child of an LGBTQ family. So I think what we need to begin thinking about is aligning ourselves with value-aligned organizations and value-aligned groups, and really show that these issues isn't isolated to us. It's isolated to all of us. These are American issues. These are very holistic issues. We're talking about food security, access to medication, access to clean drinking water. We're talking about equitable education, and it's not, and those are not LGBTQ issues. What we are finding is that the most vulnerable will end up having the worst outcomes when these things are in place, when these inequitable policies are in place. But that does not make it an LGBTQ issue alone. And I think the more we start aligning ourselves and building in larger coalitions and start building greater collaborations, this is when our issues become everyone's issues, because it is. And then we can actually start seeing real impactful change.
Thank you. Rebecca, how if you come in and build on that?
Well, it's Mimi leaves some big shoes to fill to follow always. I think, this is a critical time for us, and I hear all the conversation about, we've always been under attack. So I think, that's very true. Although this does feel like a moment where the kinds of challenges that we face are particularly egregious, and where the veneer of civility has been ripped off, and there's just sort of raw, a degree of raw hatred, just really that we face. I would say this is a time when we do need to remember that we have to stand together. We've been here before. We know how to do this. It's an important time for us to ensure that we're holding the folks most impacted by homophobia and transphobia, but also the ways that sexism and ageism and race really intersect and compound the experiences of discrimination and marginalization. I think we need to be mindful to really stay rooted in our approach, in a combination of vision and heart and strategy. I think we cannot just move forward with some spreadsheets about how we're going to do this. I think we have to really stay attached to what is our long-term strategy? How do we not let ourselves get pulled into a constant reactionary cycle? I think we need to stay attached to our hearts and our commitment to community and each other. And I think we need to continue to have a vision, as I think somebody, I think maybe put it, that do we need to be not just to return to what it was like before Trump, but how do we really remember our long-term vision? And I think I would just say our future really depends on the community. This is not up to a handful of people who have quote unquote leadership roles to fill. This is really about us as a community, and about us really doubling down on what is most important to us, and what are the resources we really need to be able to move forward together. And it's a moment of shared responsibility, and we need people to really come together. And I'm proud to say this feels like it's happening, that people are coming together and responding to this with generosity, with action, with deepening commitment. We're seeing increasing volunteerism. We're seeing people really commit to being in this with us for the long term and with each other for the long term. So I think that is really the critical piece moving forward. And we existed before there was widespread support. We will make our way through this, but there are going to be some losses along the way. And I think we need to be realistic about those, and strategic about how do we minimize the impact of the losses that we will face, certainly in terms of funding and the impact that's going to have on the types of services that are available for the community. So it's but I do remain not hopeful. That's the wrong word. I remain steadfast. And I also know that, again, just working in partnership is the path forward. And that is happening, and that will continue to happen.
Yeah, I agree. It is happening, and it's going to be amplified in ways that it's going to be interesting. Let me put it that way. Matt, let me bring you in, and then Nicole, I'll have you take us home. So Matt.
Well, I think I would just offer two concrete things that I hope we can and should do. And that is, as the current administration gets these billions of dollars for so-called immigration enforcement, and they start detaining people, that the minute any of us hear about that we show up at that place and we, do the Gandhi thing. We stand there and make them come through us. We won't push or shove them, but make them come through us and risk arrest. Because I think that us standing up for our immigrant friends, allies, brothers, sisters, can drive home the point about how cruel these current policies are, breaking families apart. It's terrible. And I think it's a way to get people fired up. And some of us have the privilege of being able to be risk arrest. And I think those of us who do should seize that privilege. I say exactly the same thing about the inevitable detainments of trans people who are going to are either traveling here from abroad, want to leave the country, or even traveling within this country when they are detained because their government documents do not match MF, that kind of bullshit. And there again, I think that we can turn out hundreds of people and call attention to the not only the idiocy, but the abject cruelty of what we know is going to happen. So I think those are two things that, we can do, vent our anger and show our solidarity, and hopefully educate the public about what's really happening here.
Thank you for that. And Nicole, I'm going to ask you to take us home.
Oh, well, that's well. I would like to touch base with one of the words that resonates within me, that Rebecca mentioned about responsibility, right? That we share responsibility of how we are gonna act during this time, right? I am a woman of faith, and I do believe that we cannot show hatred facing hatred. We cannot respond with hatred in this wave of hate that we are experiencing as a community. It is a time to have compassion and coming from a place of love among each other without othering. Because one of the things that I have seen in the living experience that I have in my life, it is that when someone becomes the other in any situation, we are contributing to the isolation and the perpetuation of violence and marginalization of this person or this community. So to me, the word responsibility is part of, the way that we are going to show up. Ella para Trans Latinas 32 years ago, it started as Proyecto Contra SIDA por Vida. And without any funding and without any resources, the same community came to respond the crisis of HIV and AIDS, and was the same community from a place of love and compassion took care of those who were losing their lives. So now it is, I always said, hatred is a pandemic, as the pandemic of AIDS, as the pandemic of COVID. But hatred is a pandemic that we need to address and combat with compassion, purpose, loving communities, without and seeing, and with the awareness, with the awareness who is not in the room. Because I always said, like, you can see, this panel, and sorry for everybody, but we are not young. We are not doing this work for the youth that we have. We are doing it for the hope that our next generations can have a better future and can have a better life. So our purpose is bigger right now. And I think that taking that responsibility with compassion, love, and a strategy, out of not from a place of fear, is the way that we are going to walk farther in community. And the last thing, my pronouns, I always said my pronouns are she and we, because in my indigenous tradition, the I, the individual, couldn't exist without the we, without the community. So I always say this, and try to remind our roots, our indigenous roots, that is just within the community that an individual can survive. So we are part of the whole. And the whole, right now, we are saying LGBTQI plus, with emphasis in the trans individuals. But at the end, this is a cause for humanity to make this world better for all. So that's it.
No, thank you for that. I think that, that's the perfect way to end this part of the conversation. And, I was talking to a colleague of mine around, that I think the other side continues to underestimate the LGBTQ community and continue to underestimate our allies. And, I have no doubt that we're going to show up in a very interesting way in the next coming months, years, as a community, link arms with other communities, other groups, and really, fight for the future that we all believe and that we all deserve. So, thank you, Rebecca, Mimi, Nicole, and Matt, for such an engaging conversation. As we transition to the Q&A portion of today's event, we want to thank you for your participation so far. This is your opportunity to engage directly with our panelists and ask any questions you may have. To respect everyone's privacy, we will be stopping the recording at this time. But before we move forward, we'd also like to remind you about Horizon's LGBTQ organization directory. This comprehensive resource provides information on over 100 LGBTQ nonprofits and programs across the 9 counties of the San Francisco Bay Area. It is a valuable tool to help you connect with services, organizations, and initiatives that are making a difference in our community, really making a difference. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and having a meaningful discussion. Thank you again for being with us, and let us continue working together to support and empower our community.